All right, everybody. Welcome to the brand new Fantasy Feud podcast. This is a show that will bring you the best advice possible and teach you how to perfect your craft of fantasy football along the way. This is the expert trio of myself, Stone Darrow, Paul Cotton, and Mason Reed. We bring you more than 30 years of fantasy football knowledge, and us three will simplify the world of fantasy football with weekly analysis, advice to crush your matchups, and, of course, strong opinions that go against the grain of typical fantasy analysis. Before we start this podcast, I want to shout out YouTube and Spotify. It's going to be the Fantasy Feud. If you're listening on one, go check it out on the other. That's the Fantasy Feud, capital T, capital Fs. Check out our Discord channel that we got going on, brand new. It's also the same name. And if you have any questions or things about your league that you want to ask us about, email the fantasyfeud@gmail.com. That would be capital T, the capital F fantasy, and capital F few. So enough about the intro. We'll just get into introducing ourselves today. Mason, take it away.
All right, guys. My name's Mason Reed. I have a master's degree, so this is kind of my hobby. I basically do fitness for a job. I do all kinds of rehab type things, and right now I'm a personal trainer. But yeah, I basically like to watch a lot of Star Wars. I read a lot of Star Wars. I play PlayStation, basically only Madden, and play fantasy football. That's about it. Paul?
Hey, how we doing? My name is Paul. I haven't gone to a big fantasy school like they have, but fantasy is kind of my religion. I've been playing it since I was in 8th grade every year. Just doing some buddy leagues and also doing pay leagues. Like to, I guess, kind of piggyback off what Mason said. I'm kind of a nerd myself. I like to collect comics and action figures. But like I said, fantasy is kind of my go-to. And I'm sure we're going to be here to help everybody get to where they want to be and be champions just like us.
All right, and before I introduce myself, I want to say our behind-the-scenes guy, Casper, want to shout him out because he's the reason this is all going to be possible. He knows he's going to be doing all the editing, audio, video, everything for us, so big shout-out to him. But I'm Stone Darrow. I went to college at Monmouth and studied computer science and ran track and field there for 4 years. Pretty much ran track my entire life. And been playing fantasy football for probably like 12 years now at this point, since I was like 11 years old. My dad forced me to start playing it. Essentially, like Paul said, it's a religion at this point. You know, you gotta go in and do it, and you don't look back. More of a cult, actually. You know, because we don't know we're being seduced, but we're being seduced. Let's be real.
Very true.
But so if you guys have any fantasy football history, any leagues you want to talk about, so kind of give ourselves credential, go ahead.
All right. So, like Stone, I've been playing fantasy football for a very long time now. I remember being in my first league at 16 years old.
Week.
Possibly sooner. I don't even remember. But yeah, like Stone said, our dad got us into fantasy football hard. Sundays was football day. We did not go to church. We went into the garage, which turned into the game room, where there was, 5+ TVs on at all times?
Nowadays, there's actually, I think, 7 or 8 now. But
yes.
It's like you're walking into a Buffalo Wild Wings, man. It's amazing.
It is. And we watched every single game, noon to the Sunday night game. There is never a dull moment in that house when it came to fantasy football. Our dad, he was able to decipher it. He explained it to us very well. He would tell us things that it was hard to kind of understand at the time being, but he's watched football for so long that he's just brought us into it, and we've learned since we were very young, very young. I don't know. It's crazy how much fantasy football we've been involved in.
Yeah, I was going to say, essentially when I was like 11, 12 years old, whenever I started, I was really young. At that point, he ran my teams for me because I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know anybody that was good. I just drafted my guys from my Madden teams, But so no one was ever that good, but he still would run the teams and do good for him. So, we have good credential coming from him. He's I would say he's borderline brilliant in terms of fantasy football.
I would agree.
Paul, you got anything to add about your fantasy history over there?
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off what you guys said. Like my intro, I started 8th grade, hopped on Yahoo for a free fantasy league. At the time, didn't really understand it and just kind of picked the players that I liked to watch the actual NFL. Huge Bears fan, so, I tried to grab as many as I could. Throughout the years, Matt Forte, he's probably my go-to, my favorite fantasy player of all time. Yeah, so it's just kind of one of those things where start off early, you keep playing, you kind of get used to it, and then you start branching out into some different paths. But me and Mason, we've co-owned a league. It's not that simple to do. You kind of got to be able to trust people, and that's what all three of us have right here. Is we have a lot of experience and a lot of trust within each other, and I feel like this is going to be a great place for you guys to want to learn to better your craft at fantasy football.
I'll say me and all three of us have very different kind of draft styles, I would say, in terms of how we play. Like, we all think of things very differently. I've been co-opting a team with Mason now for like 6 years, and I mean, the entire draft is pretty much just him saying guys that he likes and me saying guys that I like, and we kind of just pick a 50-50 split between all of them. I mean, there's never like guys that we usually agree with.
You know what I love? We'll be in these leagues, and I hear it in our CBS league zone, and I hear it in our ESPN league, Paul. People are always like, oh, it's easier for you guys to win because you guys are together. And quite honestly, you have, like Paul said, you got to trust each other.
Harder.
It is harder. Like, you have to be like, here's me saying something, here's Paul or Stone saying something. We all have to talk it out. We have to agree, and then we have to trust each other because somebody's getting the decision that we get to make. Now, sometimes, you might be like, oh, well, it's just easier because you guys get to talk it out amongst each other. You can talk it out with anybody in your fantasy football community. I don't care how it is, but when you play by yourself, you ultimately get to make the decision no matter what. When you play duo, it's a 50-50.
It's one of those things where you kind of have to put your pride aside. You said there's going to be some weeks where you kind of have to step back, even though you really want to make a certain play in a flex or want to kind of have that fringe starter and put him in because you think he has a good matchup. But it's just one of those things. Like you said, you kind of have to just pick and choose your battles for it. And I feel like the correct way to put it, I guess, is just put your pride aside.
Yeah, I was going to say, when me and Mason have ran these teams, it's been a disaster in terms of setting lineups, as you were saying, sometimes because, like, you have your guys that you want to set, obviously. It's like your guy of the week, but Mason has a different guy of the week, and so we go with one of them, and it's usually the other one that goes off. Like, last year, Mason loved Naeem Hines, and we would never start him when he'd go out and get 30 points because we'd be starting, like, Darius Slayton because I liked him, and he'd be going out and scoring, like, 3. So, yeah. I mean, yeah, like, having two people can be helpful, but at the same time, I think solos is the way to go if you're going to do a league, just because every decision is yours. Yeah, exactly. You're as good as yourself. You're not going to be let down by somebody else. Well, not let down because, like, when I do it, I don't care if we do have a bad start, but you got to be able to accept the decisions and move on. And that's why I feel like duos is harder than singles. I just
kind of going off of that. Me and Paul have co-owned 2 leagues together. Actually, they kind of booted us. They didn't boot us, but they made us split in one league. But we also are in another league together that we co-own that all the teams co-own. So there's 8 teams, Paul?
I think 6 teams. Maybe 8.
Six?
No, yeah, I think you're right. It is 8. It is 8. Yeah, it's
8. This is an auction league, correct? 2 quarterback, 2 tight end.
Yep.
So yeah, we also do a very diverse set of rules and leagues that we're in. Like, they're a part of that auction league. I've never been a part of an auction league, so they could explain that stuff better than what I could. But
let's talk about how fantasy football works. Let's try to kind of decipher different league formats. You guys hear the?
We're gonna talk about your dogs crying in the background.
Well, we got Chopping outside, then we got Ruby kind of howling. My husky. Oh, there she goes.
All right, go on with what you're saying.
No, but yeah, like, let's kind of talk about how fantasy football works. This is a fantasy football podcast. What better way to start off our podcast than just talking about different league formats, different draft styles? You know, most leagues. I'll start it off. Most leagues are playoff leagues. Have you guys ever played in a league that was a non-playoff league?
I have never heard of that before, to be honest with you. I don't know what the point of playing if you're not going to go to the playoffs is, you know?
That's what I was just about to say.
I would never do that.
Yeah.
Stupid.
But that's a thing, though? Like, that people do that? Thing.
Yeah, it's actually apparently quite common.
So, like, what would the... So I feel like that's like the only league we've never been a part of is a non-playoff league. So it's like the objective to kind of have like the most wins in a season.
Yeah,
that's weird. That's
I
really
feel like those
weird.
are kind of leagues that are just like family leagues, probably, where everyone in the family picks players that don't really know what they're doing. I love jumping in family leagues because I just whoop everybody. It's like, oh yeah, you want me to? Okay, yeah, I'll come play fantasy football. I'll come championship. Not a big deal.
Yeah, it'll be a nice friendly experience, right?
Yeah. But yeah, you guys.
I was gonna say the first format and the most standard format would be like your redraft leagues, where you draft a team 1 year, roll with it for the year, and then at the end of the year, you guys just redraft a whole new team. I'm not usually in many of those. I usually try keeper leagues for the most part, but redrafts, I've been in a couple, and I'm just not a huge fan of them. Because I feel like drafting good. Like, I think that deserves some sort of reward at the end of the year. So, like, if you drafted someone like, well, I mean, Christian McCaffrey, but I mean, if you're number one, you're obviously taking that guy. So, and you're obviously keeping him. But if you snag somebody like, say, like round 5 or something, and he ended up scoring 27 points a game, like, it's kind of rewarding to be like, oh, I drafted that guy really late, and now I get to keep him. He's mine forever. Like,
I agree.
Kind of like a Stephon Diggs last year. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think Diggs was probably about round 4 or 5 last year and turned out to be one of the top receivers. I think maybe if not receiver 1.
And he's going in first rounds this year, correct? I don't know what his ADP is at the moment.
Late
but
first, early second.
It's got to be like 10 or 11 would be my guess.
Yeah.
And then, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, redraft leagues, I play with some guys that like the redraft leagues, and it's essentially just people get sick of their team. I feel like there's good reason to do redraft, but when you're invested, man, you love the keeper leagues, just like Stone was saying. But anyway, Stone, you want to go on to the keeper leagues?
Yeah, I was going to move on to the keeper leagues, and that's probably the one that we have the most experience with and that we're going to be the most helpful with. I'm in a 1-keeper league. I took over a team for another 1-keeper league, and then me and Mason co-own a 3-keeper league. And personally, my favorite is the 3-keeper league. It's just so fun because if you draft, if your team's bad one year, you can make trades, and then you make 1 keeper 1 year, and then you can build your team the next year, maybe draft well, and you'll be competitive again within 2 years based off the people you're keeping. And then, so for instance, me and Mason, we've been co-owning this team for 6 years now or so.
Yeah.
And we drafted Alvin Kamara almost at the end of the draft when he was a rookie. We drafted DeAndre Hopkins, who got dropped one year when someone had 3 really good keepers. And we drafted last year it's technically the first round, but it's the 4th round, Antonio Gibson. So we're sitting there with 3 guys that go in the top 2 just because we drafted really well. And it's just that sense of rewarding how you've played in the past, I guess. I think that's the thing I enjoy most about fantasy football. Most people would actually complain about keeper leagues, though, because of the fact that like a team like us, it's like, oh, we can't beat them. Why would we even play?
Yeah.
When you have, I guess, a certain amount of teams that are competitive or have really good knowledge when they're playing, know who to pick, and they know, I guess, the players that they don't have to keep in order for knowing that they can still pick them up when they want to in the draft. I mean, like you said, Stone, it's just kind of one of those things where you try to want to get as much reward out of it as you can. And with the keeper league, it's like Stone said, you want to get as much reward out of it as possible. And knowing how to pick and where to pick, I feel like you can build rosters very well. But then there's also going to be teams where they don't really know what they're doing. And so they'll be throwing players back that maybe should be kept And it kind of gives you a competitive advantage to come in and know where they should be drafted, what their ADP is, and kind of pick them up where you see fit.
And to elaborate kind of on what you said, the 3-keeper league, these teams that are not competitive at the bottom for 1 year, and like these guys, maybe like the team who won the Super Bowl has 6 potential keepers on their team. They have to drop 3 of those guys. So now 3 guys at the bottom of the league get 3 superstar caliber players. I know in our league, people like Julio Jones, Allen Robinson's going to be available, like David Montgomery. These guys that go before the 3rd round, they're all going to be available. I'm actually not sure about Julio. He might be around
he's 4, about 3rd round right now. Yeah, Allen Robinson is about round 3 as well. But to combat what you guys are saying, sometimes leagues will put a cap on how many years you can keep a player. But they'll also do things like in a league where me and Paul play, you can't keep anybody. Was it 4th or 5th round or earlier?
You can't keep any of your top 4 picks.
Okay,
so you can't keep. Somebody. So it's 5th rounder ahead, and when you pick that player, say, for instance, the league Mason's talking about, I ended up keeping Cole Kmet in the 14th round because last year I had picked him in the 15th round. So it's the highest player you can get will be a 4th round player when it comes draft time. Your keeper, you just keep him in that round.
Yep. And that's understandable, like keeping someone that late like Cole Kmet, but at the same time, I don't know. I'd probably keep someone a little higher than that because if you can't keep anybody before the 5th round, I would just try to stick with like the quickest possible pick in there just so you have at least someone who's solid, Because, I mean,
that's understandable, but to go along with some of the rules that we have, it's actually you can't have dropped a player or traded a player in order to be able to keep them, so they have to stay on your roster the entire time.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that you have to kind of worry about where you're trying to play the waiver wire later in the season. You're trying to also contemplate who you don't want to drop to where you can be able to keep them if they kind of break out. And that was the situation I was in with Cole Kmet and Zach Moss. I chose the latter or the former with Cole Kmet, and I feel like that's be the number 1 receiver or the number 1 tight end in Chicago. And if I could get somebody who's a top 15, top 20 tight end in the 14th round, I'm happy with that.
Solid. That's solid. Although I will say I'm not a big fan of tight ends in the NFL just yet because, I mean, really, you can only get like 5 of them. And then if you're not getting the top 5 guys, you're not getting the value you want out of the position. But if you have one of those top 5 guys, you're pretty much putting yourself in position to win your league right off the rip. Tight end is such an undervalued position, and I feel like that's a part of the reason why me and Mason have lost 4 Super Bowls co-owning our team is because we've never had a tight end on our team.
Yeah.
And if we had someone like a Travis Kelce or George Kittle, it's like our teams would be to the next level, like unstoppable.
Nobody would let us get them. They would not let us get them. I promise you that. One more thing we could say on keeper leagues, probably, just like one more variant, is that auction league we play in. It's probably one of the most diverse like league set of rules I've ever played in. It is kind of like a keeper league and a dynasty league combined. You can basically keep players for anywhere between 3 to 5 years, I think. I don't remember all the rules. There's so many freaking rules. Yeah. It's not considered a dynasty draft or league, but we have rookie drafts every year. And then we keep players based off of dollar amounts. But in this league, you can make trades and you can trade people for that amount, and keep that value instead of losing that player. I don't know if that makes any sense. There's so many league rules in that. But
if I remember right, you guys get to keep all of your rookies you draft as well, right? If you hang on to them for the whole year?
You do. They stay on a rookie scale. So kind of what Mason was talking about, where you can keep certain players for up to, I think, 2 to 4 years or 2 to 5 years. They increase a dollar amount every single time you keep them, though. So say Zeke, for instance, he was probably looking at about $48 last year, I think. And he would have been on our team for the 3rd year. But instead of keeping him, we ended up choosing, I believe it was Mark Andrews at a lot cheaper of a cost. Well, actually, no. I think it was Michael Thomas we dropped. He would have been around $50 as one of the top receivers. So we got to keep that money instead of keeping him, and just kept the difference of what it cost to get Mark Andrews as a keeper, which I think was maybe under $20.
Too bad Mark Andrews didn't pan out, honestly. Mark Andrews last year was
Pans
a
out
big
every
time
once
bust.
in a while. He'll have 20
Yeah.
points one game, and then he'll have 5 points next. But anyways,
what was the stat you said about him? Didn't you say he had 7 games under 10 points last year?
He had 7 or 8 games under 9 points last year.
Yeah,
and when you're looking at that's so horrible for a guy that you look at as a top 6, 7 tight end.
I'd say top 4.
Now,
I would have said top 3 before the emergence of Darren Waller.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Darren Waller's easy 3. Very easy 3.
Yeah.
But now it's like I'm personally staying away from Mark Andrews, even though he's going to have those games where he will win you games with his 20 points, whatever. Yeah,
I bet he's
week 1.
I bet he's better this year. His stats aren't bad. Like it's like you said, he has those 20-point games, and then he has the 4-point games to kind of balance that out. And at the end of the year, you're looking at it, and it says he averages like 12, 13 points. But realistically, that's just so iffy. You just can't deal with something like that. But so the next set of leagues that we haven't talked about yet that we've all been a part of is the Dynasty League. I've never personally been a part of a 10-team or a 12-team Dynasty League, but I have done a 14-team Dynasty League with these two guys, and I want you guys to kind of talk about that league and what you thought about that when it ran for, I think, the 2 years we did it before all the people that we were smoking disbanded it, but
we're not mad.
It was going on for about 2 years. The first year, I had attempted to co-own with a buddy. Didn't really work out. We didn't fully have that trust like we talked about, or that chemistry of playing together. And throughout the year, a team opened up, and we decided to split up. The league allowed it, whatever. So I ended up taking over my own team. Did some trades at the end of the year because I finished dead last. Gave up the number 1 overall pick. A couple players. I had Dalvin Cook. Ended up trading him with the first overall. Got back Josh Allen, number 1 quarterback, David Montgomery, as well as still keeping some of my other draft picks. And I ended up constructing a team that consisted of A.J. Brown, Josh Allen, David Montgomery, Nick Chubb, Stephon Diggs, Travis Kelce, Cole Kmet, a bunch of really good bench players that you can kind of pull in and out of the flex every week when needed. And I ended up going 11-2 last year, and I won the Dynasty. So, I mean, just because you come in dead last or you think you have a team that isn't going to produce doesn't mean you can't go from first to last in 1 year. You just got to put in that effort, and you got to kind of know how to do it, know what trades to make, and I think it all worked out.
If that doesn't tell you the kind of advice we could give you guys, I don't know what does, because he was worst to first in 1 year in a 14-team Dynasty League. I can't even explain how difficult that is to pull off. Like he won, I think, 2-3 games his first year to winning 11 the next year. That's actually
1
insane.
game.
Yeah,
1 game my first year.
That's insane. Me and Mason, we ran teams in that league, and our teams were just really good from the start. Like, we drafted extremely well the first year, so the teams just kind of ran the show for them. Like, I didn't have to worry about anything. I drafted, I think it was 3 years ago now. I drafted Derrick Henry in round 5, and the rest is history. I drafted Aaron Rodgers because he was old in round 12. So it's and then I had Kittle and DeAndre Hopkins, and I just had a bunch of stud players that it was hard for my team to lose.
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about how Dynasty works and the form, or what makes it different from a keeper league. So when you get into a Dynasty League, you're expecting to play for years and years and years and years. Okay, you get with a bunch of group of guys that you trust will stay in the league together. This makes the young guys very, very valuable. You will see in a keeper league versus a Dynasty League, the way people are drafted, it's crazy. You'll see rookies go super early. Anybody that's, if you're a running back and you're age 26, 27, but you are still a top dog for the fantasy year, you'll still go high, but you won't go as high as you would in a normally redraft or keeper league. So that's just kind of something to think about and look at a Dynasty League perspective.
That's why I like
To kind
Dynasty
of
League so
piggyback
much.
off of that. Oh, go ahead, Stone. Sorry.
I was just going to say that's why I like Dynasty League so much. It's just you have to have that investment into a league, and you draft your team, and it's just what you're stuck with, and it's what you have to deal with, and it's a matter if you're willing to put in the time to make your team better, like Paul did. Didn't really have to put much time into it just because the team I drafted was pretty much the team I had both years. I mean, I made a trade for James Robinson last year at one point, and now looking back on it, it was a good idea because everyone decided to disband the league without telling us. So he was a one-hit wonder. He's not going to be as good as he was last year, but looking back on it, it was a great trade for me.
Kind of to piggyback off what Mason was talking about, except not necessarily running backs. Switching over to receivers, talking about age, and 3 years ago now, Julio Jones would have been still one of the top receivers in the game, one of the kind of still in his prime, and he didn't go to the third round. And when people took him, it's just like, how do you let Julio Jones fall to the third round in any draft? But like Mason said, it's the younger guys, they're rookies, they're valued a lot more differently in the Dynasty League because you're going to be keeping your entire team whole year, the whole time. It's not where you can do 1, 2, 3 keepers. It's all your bench spots, like your kicker, your defense, who you draft, who you want to go after, is who you now have to take over almost like you're a head coach or consider yourself like a GM of sorts because you could go out, you can make those roster moves, you can do the trades, and not all head coaches have that type of power in the league. So it's more like a GM position that you can look at rather than just kind of controlling any type of fantasy league, a keeper, redraft, whatever.
Yeah, segueing off of that, like talking about how you kind of have to be the head coach of a team and everything. I want to talk about specific lineups and roster configurations in leagues, such as like classic rosters and stuff like that. But I want to talk about the one that we're trying out this year that's brand new in a league, and that would be having your classic roster, but we have a head coach slot as one of someone you start every week. So Mason, if you want to explain that a little more, since I think you understand it more than all of us.
Yeah, we're trying that out this year in one of our leagues. So basically, ESPN, I don't know how long they've had it. The guy that runs the league wants to change it up. It's getting more common now to take kickers out of the leagues or defense special teams out of the leagues. And some people were mentioning that in the league, so he wants to kind of compensate for what they want, but he also wants to bring in another factor. The easiest way to do it right now is basically you kind of get as many points as the head coach scores. Okay, and that's a very simple setting, but you can do so much with it. You can be like, well, if the team loses X amount of points, it's almost like a defense in a way, very similar to a defense. I'd have to pull up ESPN right now to look at all the settings, but I think the most simple way to do it is the head coach gets the amount of points that the team scores.
It's essentially a lot. It's essentially, like you said, it's a defense. If they allow points, the head coach loses points. And I don't remember, we talked about this, about 2-point conversions and stuff it was like 4th down conversions. Like if you go for one and you get one, don't you get a point for that also, maybe? Or maybe
we want that. So we wanted to create our own. We had all these ideas what a head coach can do, but really it all came down to yards allowed, points scored against, yards gained. That was basically all the settings you can mess with, and that gets pretty sticky when you're like, okay, well, if the head coach loses by 1 point, it's only 1 point loss. If the head coach wins by 20, they get an extra 20 points. When we were kind of looking at it, and we were kind of like, well, honestly, you could have so many different perspectives on all right, well, if the head coach only wins by 1 point, it was a damn good game, so the head coach had to make a lot of good calls. Why can't we give the head coach an extra 10 or 15 points just for winning by 1 point? And then there's just, like I'm saying, it's just so much to look at.
It's a new position, and I'm sure a lot of people don't actually do it because it's so random and everything. But we want to try it out. We've done a little bit of everything at this point, so why not? But backtracking off of that, we can just talk about classic rosters and stuff like that. What most teams are going to be doing, so your classic roster of 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 receiver, tight end, kicker, and then a defense slash special teams. Like that's pretty much the standard league that everyone runs. I would say most leagues nowadays do that PPR. Back in the day, it was the opposite. No one would do PPR, but nowadays PPR is every single league you're in, I would assume. So when you're drafting like a classic roster, what's kind of the approach you guys would want to take with a classic roster?
2 running backs.
With
2 running backs.
I'm the same way. I'm always going to value a running back in almost any type of league. Even when it's 3 receivers over 2 running back or 3 receivers over 2 receivers, I'm always going to kind of value the running back more just because even with 32 starting running backs in the league, now multiply that by 3 for your receivers because you have 2 outside in the slot. So you're looking at 66 potential starters over 32. And so I feel like the running backs is kind of where you always have to get more bang for your buck. And I just typically value them, try to grab most of my starters in the first 4 rounds.
I think I would agree with you in terms of a classic roster. You kind of almost have to go with a running back because 2 running back, 2 receiver. I mean, everyone's going to draft running backs in the first round, like the first 6 picks almost. So like it's like that position's already running dry. And it depends on the amount of teams you have too. If you have 12, you almost want to go with running back no matter what. But I've always been the guy that's kind of stayed away from running backs in the first round, unless it's someone like Alvin Kamara or Christian McCaffrey, like your obvious guys that you have to take at that point. I think once you get dwindled down,
you said if you have one of those top 3 picks,
yeah, if you have one of those top 3 picks, it has to be a running back. But I mean, if I'm sitting there at 8 or 9, and Devontae Adams is sitting there, like I'm probably going to pick him because he's going to go out and score 30 points a game. Like I'm not going to take a running back who's going to go score 20 as opposed to a guy who's going to go score 30. I just think that's the smarter pick.
That makes total sense.
And that kind of moves into our other roster that we like to do with a flex and 3 receiver. This is my favorite format of a league. Would be probably 12 team, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 receiver, flex, tight end, kicker, and defense. How would you guys change up your strategy at all, knowing that there's now 3 receivers and a flex, so that could be 4 receivers possibly?
Yeah, I'm tempted.
Yeah, I definitely would. Go ahead, Mason.
Sorry. I'm tempted to go wide receiver, and if I have any control over my picks, I'm trying to go either 6 or behind that.
Yep.
6,
yeah,
7,
that's an underrated thing. Is a lot of people like to pick early and get your studs, but I think picking behind 6 is your safest bet because it's going to allow you to have a much more fluent draft as opposed to getting 1 star and then not knowing what direction you're going to go in the rest of the draft. But continue on. Sorry.
No, exactly. Like this year we talked about, I'm probably picking, DT if I'm in pick 7 and I have to look at picking between Zeke and Saquon. I'm going to take the surefire Devontae every time. Now, that being said, when you are in the top 3-4 picks, it's very hard to pass over an Alvin Kamara. You're not passing over Christian McCaffrey if you have that. So that changes your draft strategy, obviously. But if you have the choice, probably go a little later. And that way, so you're always picking 12 picks away instead of 18 picks away, something like that, I
would say the first pick in the draft is the worst pick to have completely. Because most leagues, if you say it's a redraft, you're going to snake back. So you get McCaffrey. Yeah, you got your stud. He's going to be surefire. Everyone knows that. But now you're looking at the 24th pick of the draft, which is a complete swing from elite talent to very good talent, but they could drop off or maybe even have bad years kind of players. Yeah. Not your first sure's anymore. Whereas if you draft 8th in a 12 team, you get 8, you swing back at 16. So it's the same number pretty much every time. And I think a later pick just gives you more value, to be honest with you. Not 12. You don't want 12 either. Like 1 and 12 are the worst 2.
Yeah, no, just with that roster construction, I would typically go receiver with my first pick. Piggybacking off what you guys said, try to get towards the back end of the draft. I typically love that sweet spot of 9 to 11, just because, like you said, Stone, if you're sitting at the last spot, kind of have to wait another 14 or however many picks, 12 picks, obviously. And so you don't get that back-to-back at one point. It's almost like you're missing out on so much of that top-tier talent. And when you do kind of get back to that spot, it's like you're picking almost tier 3 type players already, or maybe some fringe tier 2. So I mean, I kind of like to get to that 9-10 spot, sitting around there. But I mean, when it comes to having more receivers, you obviously kind of have to take those ahead of the running backs. But at the same point, I would go running back or receiver running back, and just try to fill out and play the board from that point.
I've always, in 12-team snakes, I'll always shoot for 7 or 8. That's like my sweet spot that I really like. And usually at 7 or 8, I'm looking at the best receiver in the draft, and I'm almost always going to take him. Last year, I took Michael Thomas, instead of Devontae Adams. If I took them, I would have had Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill on a swing. That would have been pretty nice to have on my team.
Yeah.
But I typically like to swing back, and I usually take best available, but I'll take a receiver at that pick. I will push off a running back till round 3, because usually at round 3, you're still looking at that one breakout candidate sitting there that can go out and score 20 points a game still. And usually I've been lucky enough to nab that person. Last year I did not in that league where I took Michael Thomas. I think I ended up not drafting a running back until round 5. I advise you don't do that, because I was just taking. I started the league off 0-8. Michael Thomas hurt, but I did come back. I won out the rest of the year and just barely missed the playoffs by point differential. So,
do you remember the year we went 0 RB theory, which was don't draft a running back until the 5th round? We picked LeGarrette Blount, Frank Gore, and we won did we win the championship that year?
Yep,
I think?
that was the only one we've won. We've lost 4, and we won the Super Bowl that year.
I know, that was amazing.
Conveniently, I'm going to guess that was the same year that LeGarrette Blount had his league leading 18 rushing touchdowns.
Yep. Yeah. New England Patriots, baby. We knew he had the volume there. In New England, it's a question mark with running back every single year, but we knew he had the volume, so we said screw it. No, we'll go into one more league thing, and that would be IDP, or your defensive players. We're going to talk about how that factors into some leagues. Not many leagues do that anymore, but I want to get Paul. What's your take on defensive player leagues? Because I don't know if you're actually in any of them.
So I think there's a league starting up this year that we're going to try to do individual defensive players, but I actually ran one about 4 years ago. I'd ran a 12-team league with IDPs, individual defensive players, and I want to say I ended up winning or getting second in the league. My first defensive player I took somewhere around pick 9-10, and it was actually J.J. Watt. Conveniently, that was also the same year that he put up and probably should have won the MVP. I personally think he got robbed from it. But when you're picking individual defensive players, you want to favor the players that you know are going to have high amounts of tackles, so typically linebackers, maybe even some safeties or corners, mainly corners because they can be so elite and they'll get the interceptions for you. But you want to pick players that you think are actually going to stand out. And a way to kind of combat people, I guess, trying to overload on great defensive players is to set it up where you have one defensive line, one linebacker, which can be inside or out, and one defensive back, where you can switch it to either a safety or a corner. And it just limits the ability to, say, putting Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, and Darius Leonard out there. 3 of the top tackling linebackers in the league. If somebody drafts that way, and they pick up knowing how to play the individual defensive player's game rather than filling out some of their offensive bench, that's going to give them an advantage every single week, almost like you would having that premium tight end. You have the Travis Kelce, the Darren Waller, and the George Kittle. If you're playing against them, it's almost you're given that you're going to lose at least to the tight end position every week. If you have them on your team, it's a blessing because they can score just as the best of the offensive players. And so, like I said, a way to combat so many people trying to overload on great defensive players is just simply to limit it to a D-line, one linebacker, and one defensive back position.
Yeah.
That's what me and Mason have been doing in our CBS league for a long time now. We have a defensive lineman, linebacker, and D-back. And our strategy has always been to the last 3 rounds of the draft to just take all 3 of those positions. It's worked out fairly well for us. We've almost never had an unsuccessful year in that league, besides last year where we averaged 180 points per game and didn't make the playoffs. But
Do you remember Jeremy Chin?
Jeremy Chin. We had Jeremy
He
Chin.
out of Southern Illinois, right?
That's why you take your defensive players late. You can nab these guys late. Me and Mason drafted the last 3 rounds, and we took, I'm pretty sure, Jeremy Chin. It was Devin White.
Yep.
He ended up being a stud.
Yep.
And
we got some pretty good weeks out of Jeremy Chin.
I think we drafted Sam Hubbard at
defense.
Lyman. Yeah, I remember right. But we ended up with Aaron Donald somehow. Someone dropped him, and we ended up with him. So last three rounds of the draft, that's who we ended up with. And it comes down to some people don't have, like, they have a great bench, so they have to drop a defensive player. And this guy chose Aaron Donald, who might have been like on bye week, and they were like, well, just drop him for a week and just move on. Because the defensive lineman doesn't really score that many points for you. Like, if you're getting 5 points out of a defensive lineman, that's considered elite, kind of. Yeah. Because most edge rushers are considered outside linebackers. So your defensive linemen are almost exclusively interior guys, so it's kind of hard to get points out of them. So, yeah, I think we can wrap things up with that. We've kind of went over all the leagues and introduced ourselves. We're going to talk about divisional breakdowns in the upcoming episodes, so you're not going to hear us just talking about how fantasy football works. This is more of an introduction for people who aren't sure exactly how this stuff works and everything. We're expecting to start a podcast with the NFC West and East breakdown and NFC North and South for the next one afterwards. AFC West and East for our 4th one, and then our 5th one will be AFC North and South. And then by the time those are all released, we'll probably start doing mock drafts live, and you'll get live reactions of people we're taking and who we think is going to be actually good or whatnot. So make sure, again, if you're listening on YouTube, check us out on Spotify. If you're listening on Spotify, check us out on YouTube. That's the Fantasy Few, capital THE, capital F Fantasy, capital F Few. If you're on Discord, we have a server. Go ahead and join that. It's the same exact name. And like I said at the beginning, any questions on upcoming drafts, any players you might like, any sleepers, anything like that, just hit us up on the Fantasy Few, all capitals of the first letters, at gmail.com. Anything you guys want to say before we head out of here?
No, I love it. If by chance you guys are listening to this a month from now, go ahead and look for us on the social media too. We're going to have that up soon. But yeah.
Yep, we're going to try to get the username. So if we've been doing this for a month and this is your first time listening, we're going to try to get our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter handles going. We're going to try to aim for the same exact name. If we don't get it, we'll just say it in the next podcast. We're going to make them pretty much right after we record this. So, and then you got to say, Paul.
No, I mean, really just kind of piggybacking off everything you guys have said. I feel like this is going to be a great podcast for anybody who's out there trying to learn, trying to pick up the game, trying to get better at fantasy, trying to win your leagues. You know, if you're right there on the cusp every year, kind of 3rd, 2nd place, somewhere around there, maybe getting your money back, and it's kind of discouraging you a little bit because you're not winning, just come listen to our podcast. And hopefully, like they said, if you're hearing this in a month, we're going to have a lot more content out. We're going to be going over the divisions, and we're going to be teaching you guys how to be better and how to be winners. So, come back. Come and listen to us.
Make sure your league owners and commissioners are setting their lineup or setting their draft days for the week before the draft. Don't do anything before that because you don't want to have your guy tearing an ACL that you drafted in the first round who tears his ACL. Let's say today, Lawrence Toyolu or whatever his name is. I can't remember ever.
Toyolu, yep.
Yeah. He tore his Achilles today. So I'm sure nobody drafted him. But, hey, if you did draft him, he tore his Achilles. Useless pick. So try to push it to the last week you can, and we'll keep putting these things out for you guys, and we'll do mock drafts, and we'll kind of show what we're doing. So try to help you out there.
Fantasy Few out, baby.
See you guys later.